I absolutely agree with what you're saying. As I have heard people deconstruct the election, particularly in communities of color, and with all the vilification that's going on right now toward the GOP, I think people are going to be very surprised at what they see rising from the ashes. I think the GOP, as we have known it, has ceased to exist. I think that is, I think that's a done deal. I think that the elite needs to change and recognize, as you said, we are a very, very socially conservative community. And so I think that as we look, as you say, towards 2016 and 2020 and beyond, it's going to surprise people what happens, because I think people think that we are so disparate that we will never work together. And maybe that's by design, but I think you're right. I think we're going to see some very conservative Democrats, independents. I'm an independent. I think you're going to see a lot of these people get a much stronger voice than they have had in the past. And as you say, this post-Obama era, this post-racial era, if you will, seeing us work much closer together than I think people have thought, because I think our representation, our voice has been lost somewhere along the line. And I'm not sure that the GOP, and maybe this is, my own form of blasphemy, if you will, political blasphemy, if you will, for saying that about the GOP, but I'm not convinced any longer that they are the vehicle to deliver this change, to usher in this change, because purely of the perception. I was interviewed last night, and I was saying that, that perception is the reality, and so the new reality becomes the new perception. And so I think you're right on the target with that.
And I believe we are conservative in even turning away from change from the age of Obama. We were conservative as a bloc of voters in putting back in non-change when we gave Obama a second term. It was the theme of the second term was forward, but did we know forward where?
Yes.
Forward to where?
Clearly,
that is a conservatism of not change, but status quo.
Right.
And that is very far from progressive. So we are already beginning to look in the social fabric at a different type of politics and a different type of political thinking or theory that is setting the precursor of what is happening to America in the post-Obama age, where I think people are going to be looking more independent. There's not going to be sure monolithic blocs going forward. What we see is the two-party system will emerge and change. As I said before, our words will begin to create our new worlds, and this will lead to different types of transitions, transformations, all kinds of things on how we're looking across the steep forces that shape the trends, but also help us get past the uncertainties.
But I do want to look at one issue that seems to be still at the heart of maybe one area that we really, I think, as a community need to look at, a community of color, and that is sort of perceiving things through our color, through the lens of color. So many people, Samuel L. Jackson, I'm voting him for because he's black. So many of my family, maybe your family, I know a lot of people who have families saying, I'm going to support this black man. And looking at, historically how things have gone for our people and being really tied up in the ethnicity of this particular president, and yet not looking at the statistics about how blacks have fared under this administration. And those kinds of things. How do we begin to move beyond his blackness. And I have to point out, as a multiracial person, that he is also as white as he is black. But, of course, we look at perception. He presents as a black man. Culturally, we know, So how do we begin to move past that and get into these shades of gray that you're talking about, these nuances that really are the things that we will begin to settle on once, the newness of this has worn off?
I think we're going to have to begin to start thinking about the future of what do we mean by diversity. Yeah. And the words that usually come with diversity are equity and inclusion.
Right.
And I think we're moving away from diversity, equity, and inclusion to a more simpler diversity and participation.
Right.
Do we want to be equal at the table and included at the table, or do we want to be at the table participating? And
right.
when I say that table, Martin Luther King said this: we'll move from civil rights to economic rights. And as we begin to see a more polarized American fabric economically and a more troubled international economics, then are we participating at the table of capital? Are we participating at the table of developing advanced new technologies and what I like to call the 7 techs: infotech, wireless tech, biotech, microtech, nanotech, cognotech, that's brain research, and elder tech, moving people, ideas, and things? And finally, are we participating at the table of not only capital and technology, but are we competitive? Are we at the competitiveness table? And
right.
that to be competitive in the game of economics, to be competitive in the fields of technology, you have to be participating in the game. You can't be
That's right.
in the game, and you just can't be included in the game walking around. You have to be
right.
participating and competitive in the game.
That's right.
So I believe the way we get to the vision that you're conveying eloquently is moving away from diversity, equity, and inclusion and the titles that go in thereof, but diversity and participation. And then pretty
That's
soon,
absolutely right.
it's necessary to have those two words because we would have created we won't need to create the new words of the world that we created.
That's absolutely right. I've said for a long time, as I processed the last few weeks since the election, I had a lot of feelings that I had to process. And the thing that I kept coming back to was, okay, there's outreach and there's inclusion, or as you call it, participation. It's one thing to come to a few meetings and talk to us. It's very, very different to bring us to the table and actually utilize the knowledge and the breadth of experience that we bring to the table as equal partners. And so I think you're absolutely right.
And if I can add, the challenge for the age of Obama in his second term is, now that you probably have gotten the voting block revved up to put the age into a second term, how do you keep it energized to participate in the governance? That was the difficulty in the Obama first term. So much excitement to respect the history, to be a part of history, to make the history. But when the second term, midterm elections came along, we didn't show up to participate.
Right.
We did the diversity, but we didn't participate. So the challenge that they're trying to change in this second term, which is very, very pivotal for the success of the second term as we move on into the post-Obama era, is how much participation are you having to have really a tremendous amount of participation in really a close race in this current election, which was separated in the popular vote by about 1%. So the country is still well divided, and I assure you, the team on the right is going to be engaged and participating. Is the team on the left equally participating?
That's right. You're right. If you are just joining us this half hour, our guest has been Oliver McGee III. His new book, Jumping the Aisle: How I Became a Black Republican in the Age of Obama, is out. Please grab it. Tell us where we can find you online.
I'm very easily found if you Google my name, Oliver McGee. It comes right up, olivermcgee.org. Dion.com is right up there, too, because a lot of people seem to be interested in my debate with Michael Brown on disaster recovery, which is an incredibly important issue because we will have another storm come hit us. And that's really an education issue, I believe, that is going to be tracing through high schools and tracing through colleges, campuses around the country, because the young people are very interested in community action and saying, well, if we have another Sandy or another Isaac or, God forbid, another Katrina, how can we get engaged for recovery of our own country, let alone recovery of other countries and other lands? So those are the things that I'm really kind of advocating right now. But I'm also, my website is olivermcgee.org, so you can pick books up there as well. But the easiest way is to go to Amazon.com because I have a book page there.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being our guest tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. And what an incredibly, wonderfully intelligent conversation we had. This was, I've had a lot of radio interviews, but, man, these were some fantastic questions.
Well, good. Thank you so much. I hope you'll come back. I'm sorry our time got cut short.
Definitely.